Welcome back to the Let's Process That podcast. I am Emily Christopher, and I am here with my co-host, Nick Honerkamp, and our special guest today, Tyler Trantham. Hello. Welcome, Tyler. We're so glad you are with us. I'm going to be transparent and honest. This is our re-record, friends, because sometimes this is life. You don't get it right the first time, and there's technical difficulties. So we're re-recording because the conversation that we had with Tyler was so freaking awesome that we were like, we got to get this. We got to get it right. We got to have it pristine. The people need to hear Tyler's story and the wisdom that he has. So we are doing a re-record, and we're going to try to get all the goodness. And I think it's going to even be better. Now that we've had this conversation once, it's going to be even better. We even got some surprise things we may even ask on this one. So Tyler, I hope you're buckled up and ready to go. But I'm going to toss it to Nick. Nick, you kind of set us up, and let's go after it.
So, Tyler, it was a big shock to everybody when you made the move that you made. I mean, the community, you had a steady job, great career, upward mobility, community leader. Everybody thinks you're going to next be the next chief of police for the town of Waynesville, and suddenly you make a U-turn and become Mr. Dad. I mean, just shocked us all. We were stunned. We didn't understand what was going on. And for some people, this is going to be the first time publicly you're able to come out and say, this is what was going on behind the scenes. This is why I made a decision. But we were all flabbergasted. Tyler, tell us what happened mid-career with you, man.
Oh man, that's a great question, and so yeah, a lot of things. I think I can't really put my thumb on one thing in particular that happened, but I can say that it was a progression of moments and things that happened over a series of years that kind of crescendoed into this moment 8 months ago, and so. Just like to pinpoint one thing that happened, it would be kind of hard, but and nothing really happened. It was just this moment of knowing it was time and that I needed to lay it down and do something different.
So, like, when I step down, everybody's like, why is he stepping down? What's going on behind the scenes? Surely there's a backstory. And of course, everybody believes it's their right to know what's going on in your world. So, you had told us a little bit about the Texas trip, and tell us a little bit about that, because that really did set you up. You had no idea the circumstances were coming, but you did know you had been led into. Tell us a little bit about the Texas trip and where you were and what God said to you on that trip.
Yeah, 2019 was this year that I would probably pinpoint as really a shift in my life and a lot of things that happened to speak to me and kind of direct me down a different path. But in 2019, I had ventured out to Texas to a men's conference, and a lot of times in the church world, we go to conferences and we come off this high of being with a bunch of guys or being in that group for 2 or 3 days. But I can just tell you, it was the after driving home by myself with nobody in the car. It really had nothing to do with what had happened that weekend. It was just this moment of clarity that God began to speak with me about my future and give me this insight into what was to come, and told me that there was something that was gonna happen fairly soon, and that man was gonna ask of my yes, and that people would come to me. There were going to be influential people that would come to me and ask me to say yes to this, but that I needed to say no. And that's hard to do for a go-getter and somebody that's a high achiever and that's climbing the ladder. That's what I had done. I had, in fairly short order, had climbed the ladder in my organization. But God was asking something different of me. And that's a shift totally of where I was at or what my mindset was. And so in that moment, he told me this opportunity was going to come, but I needed to say no. And that was a Sunday that I was driving home or driving to the airport to fly home. And the next morning I go into staff meeting, and my chief of, at that point, 16 years in my career, announced he was going to retire out of nowhere. and nobody
Wow.
expected that, and nobody saw it coming. There was, we kind of knew that it was getting close or that he was going to make a decision, but it was not going to be that morning. And so I sat in that room, honestly, guys, and tried not to laugh because I was like, you got to be kidding me. 24 hours before, I had been given this insight into what was about to come. And, if that would have happened 5 years earlier, I
Right.
probably would have fell all over the opportunity. And let me just say this too. I don't want to come across like I expected to get that position with him retiring. I would just say that would have certainly been something I would have went after if God would not have spoken to me and threw up the stop sign.
So you did stop at that stop sign. You did go a different direction. I'm really curious. I can almost understand as a man, as we're achieving and moving down the career path, I can see where God would step in and say, "Hey, no more promotions. Don't pursue anymore. I can get that." But were you aware of what your next assignment would be? Was it already pulling on you? Did you have any idea what he was setting you up for?
No idea. And I would
Wow.
just go fast forward to 8 months ago when I walked away from my job of 20 years. I had no idea what was next. And I think that sometimes we expect to have the next 5 steps lined out
Yeah.
before we make a decision. And I knew that I didn't. I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what that meant to not chase after that next promotion. I do now,
Yeah.
3-4 years down the road. But at the moment, I was very confused. And let me just say this: me and God had some incredible wrestling matches over that situation, and arguments over. Are you sure I'm not supposed to go after? Are you sure what this would mean to my family, my income, my future, all those things? Um, so it wasn't. I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy because it wasn't. Because certainly didn't know what the next step was.
Hmm. Interesting.
And so tell us a lot about how the dynamic has changed in your family. Because you were working all the time. Of course, you got 3 kids. So for those of you who don't know, Tyler has 3 beautiful, incredible kids. And now, and a lovely wife. May I very much add that. But what is it
Yes.
like now for you to be more present? I mean, I know before you were there, you're a very present father, but to like be with them more hours in the day, what does that shift look like for you? And what does that feel like to be there in a way that you may not have had the opportunity before?
Yeah, I mean, it's made a huge difference in me personally, just on my side of things, to be present and to not be pulled in a lot of different directions, and for the last probably 10 years of my life, I've been on call in some way, shape, or form. The phone's always ringing, text messages, emails, needed and wanted and called
Hmm.
upon.
Yeah.
And so to shift out of that, Emily, into this, so first to lay that down, because us men, we get a lot of our identity from what we do, what we
Yeah.
accomplish, how we perform. And so to walk out of that identity of always being needed, called upon, the problem solver, and to shift and say, okay, now I have to lay that down and I'm going to be this and be
Mm-hmm.
okay with that. Because I think sometimes we have a hard time with being okay with that and that alone. And so for me personally, that's been a progression over the last 7 months to shift out of that mold into being a father that's fully engaged. And I'm just speaking for me. There's a lot of great dads out here that have worked 30 plus years, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
that have been engaged fathers and their work life balance has been great. I'm just speaking for me. I was gone a lot. I was mentally checked out. I knew that. And this was a way for me to get back into who I wanted to be and be for my kids. And so what I see in them is how my engagement with them, it lights them up. It's amazing to see just being able to fully engage with my 3 kids, how that changes them and how they respond to things, how they react to things, and how they go about their dailies just by having their dad fully engaged.
So looking just across the last 8 months or so, What has changed for you? Do you feel like you've grown emotionally, mentally? Like, what are some of these growth things that you've seen in yourself from laying that down and embracing an entirely new way of life, and just doing that instead of what you always had thought your life was going to look like? Where have you grown the most?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought that I would always be a cop. I would always, I would do my 30 years like you're supposed to do. And so walking away from that was tough. And I would say those first couple of weeks, if not month, maybe a little longer, was was almost a grieving process that I had to go through. I had to grieve it. And sometimes, especially in the Western world, and I say that, I don't want to make light of grieving, but grieving something we don't do very well.
Right.
We grieve for 2 days and we're supposed to go back to work and act like nothing ever happened. And so I really had to be intentional. I grieved what had happened, and not, it was my own choosing, but I still grieved the fact that I missed what I was doing. I missed my work family. I missed the community that I was engaged with, people that was close with. So I took time to grieve that. And out of that, I felt like I was able to really identify where my identity was coming from, and that I had probably gained a little bit more identity from that than I would have liked to, just to be raw with you.
Yeah.
And that I had really based my worth on those things. And so shifting out of that over the last 8 months has been a progression, but I do feel healthier. I feel like when I introduce myself, the first thing that comes up is not, I'm a cop, or I'm
Right.
Lieutenant this, or I do this for a living. And so that's been the shift. But I think it's healthy for our soul to not be our identity, not come from everything we do.
Right. It sounds like you've learned that it's not what you do, but who you are.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying, it sounds like that,
Oh, yeah.
that there's so much more depth to your purpose because it's not defined by titles or positions.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I felt like this. I was always internally, I felt it's just this unsettledness, because I knew there was more to me than what I was doing. And I knew, honestly, that I could not find that in that current spot. And you guys, just to give you a plug on one of your first podcasts, that Necessary Endings, that was something I knew, that if I was going to get and live from who I really was, I couldn't do it there.
Right.
And that's hard. That's hard to really realize and process, and know that there's more to who I am. And I know that I have to be out of this so that I can see what that is.
What's interesting is that before this season began, Emily and I sat down and made a list of people we wanted to interview. And there was not a whole lot of overlap, just a few people that we both had picked, and you were one of those people we both had wanted to pick. We've always been a fan of you and the way you've led your life. But then you posted something about 6 weeks ago where you had said something about you had spent way too much time chasing the bone of success, and that you were not going to miss out on one more day of being present with your kids. And that's what stopped us in our tracks and said, it's time to get Tyler on here. So when did you know that your wife and your kids were your full-time main assignment? And how did you embrace that? Were you afraid of that? Were you excited about that? Were you dreading that? What was it like when you found out that that was your assignment? And did you feel confident you could do that well?
Well, I've always wanted to be a father, and I always wanted kids. I would take more at this point. And I would just say that I knew that that was my assignment, but I probably put it on the shelf for a while and chased down another road, because culture tells us men that that's what that's what we do.
Sure.
Right. We attain a title. We gather some authority. We have power and position wherever that might be. And unfortunately for some of us, that's also where we get our validity from. And we base every bit of our worth off of what that is. And one thing I was able to realize in the last couple of years was that me chasing that bone of success was really my way of trying to fill some voids in me that were
Sure.
unfinished, if you will.
Mm.
And because God had given me an ability to lead, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Every
Right.
opportunity to lead, I was just going to I was just going to go after it. And what I found was that I was really using that to fill some void in me and not be secure or okay with, hey, this is my role in life. Okay.
Mm.
I'm a father and a husband. And if I don't get this right, it's not going to
Yeah.
matter what my title is. It's not going to matter if I'm the chief of police or the sheriff or the mayor, whatever the case may be. It's not going to matter. And so it was this life that came on. It was like, hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes to fully engage in that role in my life. And if that means I have to walk away, lay things down, or change, then I'm willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Were you confident you'd be able to connect with your kids in a meaningful way and be fulfilled in that?
No, I mean, honestly, you wonder, hey, why am I not fulfilled in it? Am I going to find my worth in the fact that this is enough? Is this enough for me?
Yeah.
And I think you've got to really, it's that love of being a father and being okay with that. And then, whatever else comes, I'm trusting that God will, he's got this figured out way before I do. And whatever
Yeah.
else is supposed to come out of this or whatever I'm supposed to do next, I'm trusting him, but I know this is my assignment. It won't waver. What I'm doing now with being a father and husband will not change. All this other stuff will have to interact with it and interchange with what I'm doing now.
So I'm curious. I've always admired watching you be more vulnerable, more connected to
Mm-hmm.
your emotions. Like you've always just been very healthy in that regard as long as I've known you. Did you get any pushback? Did anyone kind of attack even your masculinity or how, like, oh, you're not going to provide for your family in this way? Was there any adversity when you were like, I'm leaving this career and I'm choosing my family, and this doesn't look like the stereotypical Western Americanized way of doing it? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of two reactions. You either had some people that were envious that I was making this
Mm,
decision and that I was
yeah.
actually doing this, or it was that second guess. It was like, what's wrong with you? There's something up. I would just say that's going to happen because it's not
Mm,
natural. And I understood that. I didn't take it I had to choose not to take it personal.
right.
But there was certainly this, us men, we're not supposed to show our emotions. We're supposed to put on this pretty heavy front of who we are and how tough we are. But you've got to be able to understand that that's just not healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're right. I'm not afraid to show my emotions. I've been labeled as too passionate sometimes. And I almost felt like I had to apologize for that sometimes in my life. But I found security to know that that's just who I am. And I
Yeah.
can't change the fact that you're going to get all of me when you get me. And I can't help that.
Right.
And so to be able to try to fully communicate that to people that really aren't going to understand or really be on the same wavelength is hard. But
Mm,
certainly there was some pushback.
mm,
Mm. So I have a question. In the last interview that we did, you talked about a rite of passage. You talked about how well you were fathered, how well you were raised, but that you felt like maybe you'd missed something as a rite of passage. And then
Yeah.
in our society, we don't put enough of importance on that. And then also, I'm curious to piggyback off that question, how you feel like you're able to transfer that for your kids so that they do, particularly boys, that they get a rite of passage.
Yeah, I call it the process of becoming a man. And I think that sometimes along the way we miss things or we have to grow up too fast. We have to skip the steps of boyhood, if you will. And I had a great childhood, great father, raised in church. My dad showed me the importance of hard work and service and a heart that would just give to anybody and everybody. And
Right.
But oftentimes we miss out on something, and it's nobody's fault, so to speak. It's just that's the broken world we live in, and you just understand that, hey, I missed out on that, or I had to grow up too fast in that moment, and I had to skip some steps, and so I have to go back to that and see that little boy. I mean, I'm getting into some emotional health here, but you got to go to see that little boy and say, hey, I've got to help you grow through that again, and you can go back to that moment. And so for me, it's very important for my children. I want them their process of becoming. And honestly, one of the major reasons for me making this decision is I was not going to get 10 years down the road from now, and something happened to me. God forbid something happened, and I heard this said one time, my funeral, and people are up and they're saying all these nice things, hopefully, about me. And my kids sit there and not know who they're talking about, not know that man, that person or that preacher speaking about. And so I want to be present now and help and make sure that the process of their becoming, they're not having to skip stages. They're not having to grow up too soon, that they're right on track so that when they become men, that they're ready and they're ready for the woman that God has for them. They're ready to be the man the world needs. And so that's very important to me in this moment that I'm currently sitting in.
So my question is, and I recently had this conversation with somebody, you know, I love that there's the rite of passage and there's like this kind of like transition into like, okay, leadership and ownership of like being a man. But what does that feel like for when you raise your daughter? Because your Abigail is your oldest. I'm also curious what it looks like to raise her as this strong, confident warrior, just like the boys. But obviously with, you know, it's going to be different because being a teenage girl, there's all kinds of things going on. There's hormones. There's a lot of stuff to navigate. But with her, what does it look like raising a daughter that you want just as strong and just as capable as your boys? What are some things that you do for her that's special? Because she is the only girl too. So I know there's a very special relationship between you and her.
Well, it's important that she hears from me that she's beautiful, that she's worth fighting for, and that she is worth being pursued. And I think sometimes we as fathers fail to teach our instill that in our daughters. And I'm not saying as in a broad approach. Just sometimes that happens, and I think that's why you're going to go looking for that validation somewhere. And so I feel it's important in raising my daughter to be strong, that she knows and she hears it from her father, that she's beautiful, that she's worth fighting for, that she's worth being pursued, and that some guy's going to come along the way, and he better do those same things. That's the standard for that man in her life. Also, there's things I tell all three of my kids, because I believe words matter. I believe words are strong. That when you speak something over somebody, that it has this incredible effect on who they are. But I tell them every night, all three of them, regardless if it's the boys or if it's Abby, but they're strong, they're courageous, they have wild hearts, they're warriors, and that I love them, and that those are words I'm going to speak into their life, so that becomes part of their identity. And when something happens, wait a minute, my daddy's always told me that I'm strong, I'm brave, I'm courageous, I have a wild heart, and I'm a warrior. So this shouldn't faze me in life. This thing or this moment, I'm ready for it. And so raising my daughter in a world of chaos, she's got to know that from her mother and her father, that she's beautiful, that she's worth fighting for, and she's worth being pursued, and that she has something unique to give to this world that only she has, that nobody else has. She's a prototype. She's a one of a kind. And so those are words and things that I try to instill into Abby.
I like that. Awesome.
All right, I've got a couple questions. The first one is this, all right? So there's some people out there saying, man, I admire you. What a brave thing. Throw away your career, go home, be a husband and dad, make an impact on your kids. Day one, you wake up, it's Monday morning, you take the kids to school, your wife's at work, and now there's no kids to invest in, but the laundry needs done, stuff needs cleaned. There's got to be some disappointment somewhere where all the lofty things you're trying to do, you got to go through some minutia to get to that stuff. So tell us about that stuff.
Yeah, it's not all bravado and bravery here. I mean, you've got to realize that there's things that have to be done, and that whether it's the laundry, whether it's dishes, it's all the little things that you work together with your wife, or you. I mean, unfortunately, we just expect that to get done by the time I get home in the afternoon. And what I've come to appreciate, I tell Rachel this all the time. I say every man needs to take 6 months off and do the laundry, wash dishes, clean the house, and
Yes.
fold clothes, put them up, understand all the dynamics of all those things, because you really truly don't appreciate
Mhm.
what goes on in those hours when you're off at work chasing things. So that's not that's not sexy, if you will, of that bravado of I'm walking away from my job and this is what I'm gonna do, and here I am Monday morning folding clothes, watching something on TV. So, but it's all good. I enjoy it.
All right, now follow up to that. I just wanted to scare the brothers for a second. Now let's reel them back in a little bit. Let's reel them in. It's not that you don't have a job. You picked up some side hustle so you're not just sitting there being Mr. Mom. You've just prioritized being a husband and a father, and then put your income behind that. So talk a little bit about how that developed. It's not an all or nothing. It's just an adjustment. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely adjustment. You're right. It's just priority shifting. But yeah, I have a couple of different things I got my hands in, and it's me and a buddy of mine. We have this little saying, "Whatever it takes," and that's the mindset of where I've been very blessed with a lot of opportunities to be involved in different things, and have income from that, but not change where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to do some of that from home. I'm able to work. I'm currently sitting at a conference, or I'm at work right now, supposedly. But it's just a nice thing to be able to do. But you got to be willing to put yourself out there and
Right.
say, you know what, I might have to shift. I may have to change this a little bit. My routines may be a little different than it was, and it may not look the same. That 40-hour, 5 days a week, 6 days a week may look different, but I can still provide for my family. I've got to be willing to hustle and do whatever it takes. And so, yeah, that's kind of the mindset of the last 7, 8 months.
So, Nick, before you go and ask another beautifully deep, thought-provoking question, I want to tell y'all this man is actually, Tyler, is getting to do some super cool stuff. I got on Instagram and he's like, "Oh, I have to go so what you might not know, and please plug this.
All right.
Rachel, his wife, and his sister-in-law have this fabulous travel company, and they do the coolest things. They're phenomenal. And you can plug it. Please do. You can tell people where to follow them.
Absolutely.
But this man got to spend 24 hours at a resort in the Bahamas, and got to his job was to make sure that it was posted about. He gave a review, and I was like, you know what? It ain't so bad, sir. It ain't so bad. So yeah,
No,
please feel free to share it and make a plug for that, because it's pretty cool.
no. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been very fortunate. My sister-in-law owns a travel agency, and I've done some work for her for a couple of years, and so she sent me to the Bahamas for 24 hours in the islands, and I just had to review and check out a resort and post about it, write about it. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad, but it's just you do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And I mean, when your sister-in-law, hey, can you? Nobody else can go. Can you go to the Bahamas for us? I'm like, well, I guess I can make it happen. I mean, maybe, but yeah,
Um,
it's time to try. It's time to travel is the name of the company. So yeah, we can shoot you the handles and all that stuff. But it's just a great opportunity. Honestly, it's another one of those things like you have to reinvent yourself sometimes, and that's what I've done. I wasn't planning on doing it at 42 or 41, but I have.
well, and you can tell her to put me on the short list, that if she needs someone to zip to another
Yeah,
country or to the Caribbean, there is a girl who would be willing to do that. But no, I think that's cool because Like, that is a really unique opportunity. And if you were doing what you were doing in your career before, there's no way you would be able to do something adventurous and fun and also get you out of your comfort zone. Because even while you were making your Instagram reels about it, you're like, I don't do this. But you did a great job. And they were great. They were informative. And I think it's cool, too, that because you've shifted and you've said yes to this whole new shift in your life, now you get really cool opportunities. And I just think that's really cool because, wow, I'm saying the same words over. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. But it is cool.
Yeah.
That, sometimes we think, oh gosh, making this decision, I'm not so sure. But then we step into it and it's so much better, or there's so many neat, unique things around the corner that we weren't anticipating. So I just had to plug that because I was like, okay, this is a cool gig that he's doing right now. But Nick, go ahead with something deep and thought-provoking. I just had to take a quick commercial break.
Okay, I've got two questions for you. Number one is, you and Rachel had figured out a rhythm for life. Whether it was fair and equitable, we can discuss it in another podcast. But we did you did have a routine. And when you came home, that had to have upset the routine. I mean, what was there any major adjustments with Rachel having you back home? I have a couple in my life that when the guy retired, the woman's like, "What are you going to do with your days? Because you ain't staying home all day with me." And so I'm assuming that Rachel, once you get home, loves that you're there with the kids. But what kind of adjustments have you had to make relationally with her? And then I've got a follow-up question.
No, it's a great way to put it too. There's a lot of rhythms of life that's changed, and so you have to kind of adjust and shift. But no, it's been great. We actually like each other pretty well, so
Good.
it's been good. And we've not. What I have seen is the ability to say, "Hey, get out of the house and go have some time," and that's important. I think that sometimes we can forget that a lot of times they're there all the time. In my wife's case, a lot of times, and she needs sometimes just to be able to go and not have to worry about what the kids are doing, or who's going to pick them up, or what supper going to look like tonight. So those are opportunities for her to strengthen her, and two, it just strengthens the both of us. But it wasn't a huge shift, but I actually can see the benefits of us being able to be together and work together better, if you will, with life.
Okay, follow-up question. Last interview, you mentioned something about an emotion wheel or something on the refrigerator where you grab the kids and you just bring them in and you ask them to tell you how they feel. That would scare the fire out of most men if their kids started telling them how they felt. So tell us why you do that exercise, and tell us what the response the kids have to being aware of what their emotions are.
Well, it's been a great addition to our family. We learned about this a couple of years ago. I think in 2020. Connection Codes is the name of the minute. I don't say ministry, but that's the name. That's Dr. Glenn Hill is who kind of came up with this emotion wheel, and we have it on our refrigerator. And it's just a moment of, instead of when my kids do something like earlier, my two boys were fighting, and so instead of asking why did you do this, it's what happened. So you reframe the question to them, because why kind of is indicting. It's like, why did you do this? Instead, it's what happened to make you choose to punch your brother in the nose. And so, if I'm able to take them and they know that core emotion wheel, and they can point and say, well, I was feeling anger because he did this. And so he's able to process exactly why he made the decision to punch his brother in the nose. And so I will tell you, it helps with conflict. It resolves conflict very quickly. But it also helps, when I was making this decision to walk away, there were some rough days, and I would come home and I would just look at Rachel, and I would look at the refrigerator, and I would point to the wheel and let her know, here's where I'm at. These are the things I'm feeling. So please don't think that you've done something or that I'm upset with you. This is where I'm at right now. And I'll be okay. Give me a little while, but this is what's going on. And so, it does scare most men to death when you start talking about emotions. I actually drew this emotion wheel in my office at work, and I would have guys come into my office and say, "All right, where you at on this wheel?" And they would look at me like I was crazy. I mean, I remember the first time I brought it up, and it was like they thought I was losing it. They probably still do, to be honest with you. But by the time before I left, there was a couple of guys that would walk into my office, shut the door, and just need to talk. And they would point to that wheel and tell me what was going on. And so even for a bunch of, type A cops to be
Right.
able to understand this is my emotions, this is how it's affecting me, and I need to process it. It's just a healthy. We have to do that. I'm sorry, men listening. You have to process your emotions. It's
Yes.
just part of life. Because unprocessed emotion is so unhealthy, and you layer it with things, and then we have to spend all this time taking those layers off. And so, that's something that's really important to me in raising my son, my daughter, our family as a whole, is being able to put our thumb or point to those emotions and process that in the moment.
And I applaud you so much for that. I have a community job, so I'm around a lot of people, just like you both have worked in. And I come home and I'm just like, I dealt with a bunch of adults who do not know how to process their emotions healthily, and they are constantly giving everybody else in the world their childhood trauma because they never learned how to deal with this. So, on behalf of the world, thank you for teaching 3 more humans how to be emotionally healthy. Like, that is so huge. Thank you.
Well, their IQ is important, but their emotional intelligence is just as important.
Yeah.
And that goes for all of us. I mean, you think about it. You think about it, guys. How many conflicts have you sat in? Especially, let's go back to the church world that you sat in. That it was just a mess of emotions that we didn't know how to process. And you could have put your thumb. You could have started the meeting and said, "Okay, here's the core emotion. Well, we're going to go around the table and see where everybody's at today." But that, I mean, I say that in jest, but that really is an important thing for all of us. And no matter what realm we're in or where we're living or what we work in, is understanding what those things can do to us and not being afraid to name it and process it.
Before we move on, did you order that from their website? I'm sure there's several people.
So,
I'm even listening right now. I'm like, I need to order this for my office right now.
I'm going to tell you that it will change your marriage, it change your relationships. It's connectioncodes.com.
Okay.
Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. They have some webinars that you can take. I'm giving them the total plug. They're great people. We know them. We've gotten to know them personally, and they actually came to our house about a year and a half ago and sat on our front porch. And it was the best 4 hours of my life, honestly, to sit there with people and talk about these things and just know their heart behind what they're doing. So it's connectioncodes.com. And I can send you that information if you want to share, but it'll change. It's a game changer.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So one of the things that because I'm the only one on the screen that has raised kids that are no longer in the house. So, I used to think that we only had to raise our kids till they're 18, but no, it's a lifelong journey. I just learned their problems get bigger as they get older. So, men out there, it doesn't stop when they're 18. However, I will say this about the age of your oldest daughter, Abigail. How old is Abigail?
She's 13.
So within the next 5 years, probably within the next 2 to 3 years, she's not going to need your full attention like she needs today. She'll have her driver's license. She won't want to come home and sit with you on Friday night. She's going to want to go to the ball game on Friday night. And in the next 5 years, the actual workload of the daily grind of parenting is going to begin to lift. So I say that out loud, and I'd be curious any insight you had on that. But to other men who are sitting out there saying, wow, I could never give up my life for 18 years. You just simply realigned your life. You prioritized your wife and kids. And it's not forever. It's for the formidable season of their life, being there for those moments. Respond to that in some way, Tyler.
Yeah, I think what I always felt like was the next decade of my life might be the most important decade of my life. I'm
Sure.
41. My kids in the next decade Abby will be out of the house by then. My sons will be in their late teen years. So this next decade of my life is the most important. And some people say, well, you walked away from insurance and a retirement and 401k and all those things. I get it. I did. But to me, my retirement are those three kids. It's the legacy that I may not know what I'm investing in them now. I may not see it until 20, 30 years from now. I don't know. I can't. All I can do is now in this moment know that I have to be here. And yes, for these next couple of years, because they'll go by quicker than I want them to.
Yeah.
This is who I'm going to be. And when they graduate and they move on to that next season of their life, and maybe I go back to doing whatever I was doing. I go back to being a cop. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and try to figure that out. I just know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be invested in this next decade. It's one of my favorite authors. His name's Morgan Snyder. He says, live in the day and measure by the decade. And so I won't be able to really know until a decade, maybe 2 decades from now. And that's okay with me. But I'm going to live today, and I'm going to invest today, and I'm going to be okay with what that looks like.
That's awesome.
Well done, Tyler. Well done. I applaud you, sir.
Yes. So as we wrap up this phenomenal talk, if you had to leave somebody a piece of advice, somebody's like, man, I need a career change. I need to move. I need something. I need like a major shift in my life. What is something that you would tell them, just a little bit of wisdom that you would pass on that you've learned over the last 8 months?
Ooh, well, I would start by this. You can't make any decisions based on emotions or in an emotional state. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have to figure that out and make, oftentimes we respond out of love or fear. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to find yourself in a place where you're going to make this decision out of love instead of, I'm mad about something, I don't like the way it's going, whatever the case is. You've got to be able to find that spot. Number 2, I would say find some people in your life that you trust, that you've lived life with. For us, it was a handful of people that we were able to go to prior to making this decision and get some wise counsel and say, hey, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking about doing. And they were able to pour into our life. And so I think wise counsel is very important when you're getting ready to make a decision like this. And then thirdly, I would just say that it's not going to be safe. It's not going to be comfortable, and it's probably going to be out of your control. And that's okay. There's a lot of life that's in that. When things aren't safe, things aren't comfortable, and things aren't in your control. It's not always a bad thing. And you can live and you can find yourself in a place to be able to propel yourself into that next phase of your life, even though it doesn't feel steady. And you might feel like the ground underneath your feet is a hurricane sometimes. You're still on the right track. And so I love, there's this thing that I felt like God gave me maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, was just let out the sails. Let out the sails. You've been on this boat. You've been kind of hitting the waves and letting the waves kind of dictate where you're going. It's time to let out the sails and let the wind just take you where you're supposed to go. And so that's kind of where I've been, and that's where I'm headed.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Tyler, it has been a pleasure. If people want to connect with you or follow you, tell us where they can do that at.
Oh, wow. I don't know if they want to, but Tyler at Tyler26T. That's my Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. And Emily, I'll send you that connection code stuff. That's important stuff. So
yes,
thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. We'll link all of his stuff. We'll link everything down below so you guys can quickly follow him if you'd like, or go to connection codes, because I know I'm going to order several emotion wheels or whatever they're called. Sounds like a tool that everybody needs to have. So again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure that you are following us on all of our Instagram, Facebook, email us. All the things are listed below. You can follow Nick and I individually on our own platforms. We are listening to some amazing music right now that was done by Caleb Honerkamp. So shout out Caleb. Thank you so much. Any of the photography you see of Nick and I on our page is by the incredible Allison Frost from Before the Foundations Photography. And shout out our very patient, kind, and ever understanding producer, Adrienne Vosh. Thank you for everything that y'all do. And we will see you next time. You guys have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.